Hello and welcome, everyone. This is Joe Rowan, and I am coming at you today with our first part of our player ranking series. We're going to be talking about first base today. So, with that, I want to get into the position itself, and we're going to be going through the top 12 at the position. First base, it projects to be relatively full and also relatively shallow at the same time. So let's get started here with number 12, and that is Josh Naylor. He remains a bit of a mystery. The 31 long balls were a bit out of the ordinary for his usual profile and usual behaviors on the field. A pleasant surprise to many, but this guy remains, I'm a little skeptical on him. His 2023 featured an average of 308. Then his 2024 produced a much lower batting average with unexpected bouts of power. It may be just that, I don't completely understand what avenue he will go down for the rest of his career, but I don't see much reason to trust Naylor. The hard hit percentage was mediocre at best, while he didn't find a lot of barrels and chased often. He's still a better first baseman to draft than most, though I'd be focusing on other alternatives. And also, he's in the Arizona Diamondbacks lineup, which is a little bit better than the Cleveland Guardians. The Diamondbacks, even though they didn't make the playoffs last season, they scored the most runs out of anyone. So I like him in that lineup, and he deserves a draft at even if he is number 12 overall in the first baseman rankings. Now let's move on to number 11, and that's Luis Ariz, and he's got a rare skill set for sure. How funny is it that the only guy who was standing in the way of Shohei Ohtani's triple crown is our 11th ranked first baseman? Ironic for sure, but and really makes us realize, what kind of rare skill set he does possess. In a world where many front offices, preach OPS and preach power, it's his skill set has largely been thrown away. Batting average has kind of been shoot off to the side. He's the last of a dying breed, and he'll give you almost nothing in the home run category with a few RPI opportunities as the leadoff man. Uh, very few in the way of those, but he is a one-tool player, and he will give you elite batting average, maybe the best in the game at that. Elite contact profile for sure, and it bodes well in that department. And he's at the top of a menacing Friars lineup. He's going to do well on the Padres, and just because he's further down on the list than some others doesn't mean he holds no value. There's much worse first base options you could end up with. I'll put it that way. Now let's move on to number 10, and that's Spencer Steer, the Cincinnati Reds. And this guy, he offers a little bit of speed at first base, surprisingly. Playing first base usually means you're not the quickest on the base paths, but even though he plays predominantly in the outfield, he's the rare speed exception at the position. He had one of the quietest 2025 seasons of all time in 2024, and didn't really even hear about it, I feel like. It caused me to rank him higher than I would have thought beforehand. And the average slip is a bit scary, but playing half his games in Great American Small Park is always a treat. And I truly believe the Reds offense will operate much differently under new manager Terry Francona, Tito. And he just brings a whole new vibe to the clubhouse, a whole new energy, in addition to a healthy Matt McClain and star, Ellie De La Cruz. Tito's got a history of creating havoc with his teams and creating havoc on the base paths. So as long as Steer hits like he has hit and gets on base, I don't think he's going to disappoint you in 2024. Rather, 2025. Vinny Pasquantino, he comes in at number 9. He's a solid option. The Pasquatch, he fits well with Bobby Witt Jr. and Salvi Perez at the top of that Kansas City lineup. A fractured right thumb stopped his momentum a little bit last season. It was unfortunate to see. We all wanted to see the Pasquatch and the Sasquatch in the stadium. It's a great mascot walking around. But 2024 was an overall a win for Vinny Pasquantino and the Royals. His floor is solid with little risk, and he has almost no upside in any category, which causes me to rank him all the way down at 9 for 2025. But the power's there, and It's never gonna come with a gigantic value, I'd say, but if he's healthy for a full season, he could hit you 30 bombs batting 280. This could happen. That's his ceiling, and obviously, those are great numbers. Players don't always reach those numbers, but there's potential there, and he's a solid staple in that lineup, and I see him staying right around an 800 OPS for his career. I think he's gonna give you that. He's a sure thing in that category, and if you're looking for, stability at first base, he's the go-to. Number 8 is Jake Berger, and he is one of my most favorite value plays for 2025. He's got a lot to offer. I don't really understand why the White Sox and the Marlins trade this guy. He's young, he's on a controllable contract, he's cheap, and he can hit you 30, 35 bombs a year. He landed in Miami last season after the perplexing trade with the Chicago White Sox at the 23 deadline, and he got a lot of first base reps this past year, causing him to be eligible at the position, which is great for us. And then the Marlins traded him too to the Texas Rangers, which is great because that lineup support is going to be even better, much, much better than what he got in Miami or Chicago. Many of his StatCast metrics point to him being a regular 30 homer guy. The average isn't quite as bad as many thought it would be. He's hit 250 every year for the last 3 seasons. How's that for consistency? I love that. So, in other words, he gets a hit a quarter of the time with elite power skills, and he's only entering his age 29 season, and he has dual eligibility at first and third base and in a great lineup in the Texas Rangers. Deal. I'll take that all day long. Coming in at number 7 is Pete Alonso, and he was the savior of the Mets season last year, and with that homer in Milwaukee. And amid all the contract talks and all the distractions, they finally got that down, and Pete remained a Met. Uh, you know, that home run might have changed a lot of what his career looks like. And I'm glad he was able to stay in New York. But what I'm worried about, regardless of, him being back and playing for the Mets, is the shortage of home runs in a year which saw him play every single day. He hit 34, and that's great. But um, for the price that you pay for Pete, it was a little underwhelming, even below his standards. So when you invest in a guy like Alonso, you're essentially buying home runs. If he doesn't hit at least 40 every year, it's hard to justify price. And he's going pretty high in drafts, so be cautious. But just know that he will give you a good amount of home runs. I don't think it's going to be anything like that 53 home run rookie campaign, but he's on his way. He's on his way, and he's in a great lineup now with Juan Soto hitting ahead of him. So he's a pretty sure bet. And coming in at number 6 is Christian Walker, who's got some big power, and he was traded to the Houston Astros this past offseason. Uh, you know, his 2024 and 2023 production, and pretty much all the production for the Diamondbacks, for the Snakes, proved, they could score some runs. And I think it's going to be the same in Houston. You still have Jose Altuve there, still have Jordan Alvarez, still have a lot of guys, even though they've lost a lot of their core. And he's 34, he's a veteran, he's consistent. Statcast shows the power should still be present, and he becomes a much less interesting draft choice if he's not protected by his new teammates. If he's not protected by his new teammates, but he is, so I think he's going to have good counting stats once again. Number 5 is Tristan Casas, who's got a very, very high ceiling in an elite Boston lineup. In terms of just first baseman, I was most excited to draft Casas in 2024. I guess I'm a victim of my own actions because he was all right, though I wouldn't agree that, this past season was a total failure on his part. We can't blame such a young player for injuries and inexperience. Though he did smack 13 long balls in just 63 games with an 800 OPS, while the underlying data did support his work, one of my favorite abilities he displays is his ability to go to all fields, riding whatever pitch comes his way. He's a very balanced hitter. And in fact, five of his homers last season went over the Green Monster in left field. So, he's balanced. His ceiling remains higher than most if the whiff issues calm down. The good news about that, a guy like, say, Kyle Schwarber, he's got a very similar profile to Casas, in which he chases very few balls out of the zone, yet misses a lot that are hittable within the zone or on the edges. And the other half of the time he runs into him for homers. So that profile will play, and I like Casas this year, especially being with Bregman and Devers and Story in that lineup. I like it a lot. Number 4 is Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and he is kind of a star that's hard to trust for me. He had a great, don't get me wrong, he had a great 2024, but will he be able to put that 2 years in a row? I want to see it consistently, because I've never trusted him that much, and I don't know. His OP, just look at his OPS in 2023, 2022, and 2023. It was fine, right around 800, but it wasn't elite in what we saw last season. In fact, he was even in the 700s one year. So I think he came in with a lot of hype. Obviously, he's Vlad's son, and my confidence level in him was raised a bit when looking at the metrics. Sackhead's page was very red this past season, and he displayed a lot of good tools, but it's just not enough for me to invest at this price. He's going in a lot of places. He's going at 14th overall, which is just too much for me. When you have guys ahead of them like Matt Olson, Freddie Freeman, and Bryce Harper, I'd rather take those guys. Even guys behind him like Christian Walker, I'd rather take him just for the cheap price versus Vladdy's expensive price. Now let's talk about those other three, the top 3 at the position, and that is number 3 is Matt Olson, and many ranted and raved that Olson should be the top first baseman to draft following his 54 homer 2023. Well, I'm happy to say I still had Freeman over him, but one can reason why Olson will have a bounce back in 2025. The Braves lineup was decimated with injuries last season, and besides Marcell Ozuna, there's really 0 bright spots in the bats. But everyone's going to be back. Acuna's going to be back in a month or two. Ozzie Albies is back. Austin Riley's back. And believe it or not, Olson actually had pretty respectable final numbers even without those guys last year. So this offense should regain its frightening aura against opposing pitchers, and they should be back to the 2023 scary offense that they were. Now, let's talk about number 2, and that is Freddie Freeman. And he, folks, ladies and gentlemen, he's just the model of stability. When it comes to fantasy, there's a reason why a couple of years ago when I had my first dynasty draft, I took Freeman with my second pick. And then I think he was 19th overall because I knew how stable he was. I didn't care it was a dynasty league. I don't care he was 33 years old at the time. He's 35 now. I didn't care about that. He has given me great production. And just think about this. Freeman actually had a less productive year this season with Shohei Ohtani in the lineup, and it doesn't really make sense. But at the same time, it's a good problem for the Dodgers to have. There were some off-the-field issues this year with Freeman and his family, and his son was sick at one point. Thank goodness he's better now. But he did struggle a bit with a few odd injuries here and there too. And at the same time, nothing really changed here except that Freddie got 1 year older, and that's fine. He's already hit 3 home runs in spring training so far, 3 bombs. And if I needed a hit in a big spot, I know he's almost always going to come through. He's the model of stability and consistency, so I'm taking him all day long. It's really a thing with me going back and forth. Him, Harper, which one do I like? Well, I went with Harper here, and he's just got the highest upside out of anyone in the position. He's the premier choice. Pains me to put Harper above the always consistent Freeman, but the stats speak for themselves. Even though he only got to 30 swats this past season, he typically lands in the 35 to 40 range with immaculate counting stats in the Phillies lineup. And he steals too, so that's always a plus. And there's no question about it. His ability, his power, steadiness, he's the best option. And I'm looking forward to drafting him if the opportunity comes this draft season. So with that is the player rankings. That is our top 12 first base overall. And with that, I would encourage you to subscribe to the Just Fantasy Baseball channel. Be with you all draft season long. I'm going to be coming out with some more player rankings at all the different positions. This was just the first part in the series at first base. Also, you can drop a follow to my Twitter, and that is at JRose34. And slide in my DMs, ask me any questions you want. Be happy to talk fantasy baseball with all of you out there. So with that, thank you, and until next time, have a good one.